Thanks very much for coming along to the session. I'm Leah Swain. I'm the Chief Exec of Sirius Minerals Foundation. I was appointed by the Foundation's trustees as the first employee of the Foundation and became the first Chief Exec of the Foundation in April this year. I've got some slides, so Joe's going to share screen. Just while she's doing that, my background is as a charity chief executive. So I led Rural Action Yorkshire and then Community First Yorkshire as chief exec for a decade before moving to become a funder. It's been eye-opening coming to the funding world, but it's just to reassure you that the person that leads the foundation has been writing those bids that you've been writing for the last 10 years. So I do understand the highs and lows of trying to put applications to a funder. And we're working really hard to make sure that as a foundation, we don't just assess the quality of a bid. So we're not looking at well-written bids by consultants. We're trying to see beyond the bid to the very sort of central idea, the essence of the idea you're trying to put forward. And it's not unusual for me or an assessor to ring somebody up and have a chat about their application rather than just basing it on the words we see on the page. I'm really happy to take questions as we go along. So Joanne's going to be keeping an eye on the chat box for me. And if you'd like to raise a hand electronically, you can use the reactions button. I do know that those of you on iPads sometimes struggle with both of those. If you are, just shout out and we'll try and listen out for you. If not, hold on to questions till the end and I'll pick them all up. There'll be plenty of time. So next slide, please, Joanne. Nobody can say that now without a little smile, but next slide.
Right, okay. There you go.
Lovely. So Sirius Minerals Foundation is an independent charity that was set up in 2013. The aim of the foundation is to provide a lasting legacy to the communities around the Woodsmith mine. So the idea was that when Chris Fraser started his thoughts around developing a potash mine in the national park, he was committed to ensuring that the communities would benefit just as much as the shareholders or the mineral rights owners. The mine was originally being built by York Potash, so we were originally York Potash Foundation, and then when York Potash became Sirius Minerals, we became Sirius Minerals Foundation. Many of you will know the mine was bought by Anglo a while back. We haven't changed our name as yet. We're, as I say, an independent charity. We have 7 trustees. 4 of them are independent trustees and 3 are appointed by the corporate that owns the mine. So at the moment, they're appointed by Anglo-American. But the chair of the foundation is always an independent trustee so that we remain totally independent of the influence of the owner of the mine. The current chair is Ian Swales, who's the ex-MP of Redcar and Cleveland. Our area of benefit, so where we can spend money currently, and we are restricted to where we spend money by our governing documents. So during the construction of the mine, we are completely restricted to spending money in the borough of Redcar and Cleveland, the borough of Scarborough and the North York Moors National Park. That can be really tricky. I get applications where people say, I live a mile outside the park. We literally can't fund that. And we can only fund work that's for the benefit of the residents within our area of benefit. When the mine goes into production, our governing documents do loosen up a bit. And at that point, we have the ability to spend up to 25% of our income outside our area of benefit. But I would say in the first 10 years, that's highly likely to stay within the area of benefit or very close to the area of benefit. We, to date, we have a commitment from the mine owners to provide a charitable donation of £1 million annually. And while the mine is in construction, we will continue to receive the £1 million annually. So it looks like the production will start at the mine some point mid to late decade, so 2024 to 2028 at some point in those timescales. So it's quite a moving feast as to where our money comes from and when it comes. Those variables are very much down to building a mine, which is a complicated operation in the national park because of the tunnelling that's happening at the moment. Over the last few years, we have given out grants around our 5 charitable objectives, and the full charitable objectives are on our website, so do have a read. To shorthand them, they're around education, skills and hardship, health, facilities and environment. So those are the areas we concentrate our spend on. The income at the moment is $1 million. We've got 1.5 million to spend up until May 2022 because we have some lag in our funding. And when the mine goes into production, we then move to 0.5% of revenue from the mine. So that will depend on the price of polyhalite fertilizer at the time, but it's currently estimated to be about £5 million a year into our area of benefit. To date, the foundation has been run and managed, and all the work has been done by the 7 volunteer trustees with a little bit of administration support. They've awarded grants of just under 1.5 million to 232 grant recipients. Most of those have only received 1 or 2 grants, so quite a large number of organisations have benefited to date. We see the next 3 years of the foundation as very much a learning and pilot phase. It's about finding our feet as a grant maker. It's about understanding the local appetite for action against each of our charitable objectives. It's about getting to know the communities and the voluntary and community sector organisations, and taking the time to listen to our local communities around the mine operations to hear about what they need, what they love about their area, and what they'd like to see more of. Next slide, please, Jo. I thought it was probably worth just mentioning the relationship with Anglo-American. Anglo-American owns the Woodsmith mine, but they don't own Sirius Minerals Foundation. We're a completely standalone charitable entity. But Anglo-American is our corporate donor, and of course we would be supportive of what they're trying to achieve, just as they're supportive of what we're trying to achieve at the foundation. We often get a lot of calls saying, oh, you're Anglo-American, can you do this? And I kind of say, well, we're not Anglo-American. But I completely get why it's confusing out in the wider world. Not only do Anglo-American give £1 million to the Sirius Minerals Foundation, they also put £1 million of their own money every year into communities around the mine. And they do that through something called their Sustainable Mining Plan. The Sustainable Mining Plan focuses on Anglo-American being a good neighbour, their environmental objectives around carbon, their net carbon ambitions, and thriving communities. And under the Thriving Communities strand of their Sustainable Mining Plan, they spend money on education, health and livelihoods, which does overlap with the objectives of the foundation. So quite often we'll have shared conversations about what our education ambitions might be in terms of the money from the foundation and the money from Anglo-American. So they also, Anglo-American, they'll fund skills and employment programs. So there are some people perhaps in the room that have had grants direct from Anglo-American, not the foundation. They support apprenticeships and work experience and other community activities. They also have a team of young people. So if you're near one of the mine operations, so that's Lockwood Beck, the mine itself at Sneaton, or up at Wilton, or near the Scarborough office, they have a team of young people led by a very practical and experienced manager who will give hands-on practical support to communities as well. So that might be painting a village hall kitchen. I know they've fitted a new roof to a small community building. So it's worth bearing in mind that Anglo-American also has this kind of pro bono community support available. And it doesn't really matter if you come into Anglo-American or to the foundation. If you end up coming through the wrong door, we'll just send the emails backwards and forwards between myself and Matt Parsons and his team at Anglo-American. So that's how we fit together. Next slide, please, Joanne. The foundation's current plans are to spend 1.5 million before the end of May 2022. And the trustees have set a number of priorities for this funding period. We've just closed and awarded grants under the COVID recovery funds that we've had. So We've just awarded about 250,000 for community groups wanting to get people out and about again after people have been inside for so long. The current open grant round is for children and young people time together. It's a small grants round, £500 to £4,000 grants available. And this grant round is for organisations that are currently working with a group of young people or engaged with a group of young people who would like to just do something really nice for that group of young people. It's the trustees acknowledging that so many of our children and young people have missed out on really important aspects that's not education. So they've missed out on their residential trips, their day trips, their proms, time together with their friends. And these are really important in a child's development. So while the government focuses on the kind of academic catch-up, the trustees wanted to give something back to our children and young people to make them feel listened to and valued. So this is about hearing what your young people would like to do and then supporting them to do it. The next one down is due to launch next week, and these are climate change grants. They're small grants of between £500 and £5,000. And it's very much a pilot grant round to understand what the appetite is for doing work to combat adapting to or mitigating climate change. So grants here could be for a community energy scheme's feasibility study. It might be work to make a community building able to reduce its carbon footprint or to improve its sustainability. It might be a community approach to reducing the use of single plastic. It might be a school creating a wildlife area to boost biodiversity, or a community wanting to take action as individuals collectively to become carbon neutral. So it's a really quite a wide grant round around climate change. In October, we'll launch the Children and Young People's Emotional Wellbeing grant round. This is a much bigger pot of money. It's £450,000, and they'll be for large grants for projects over 2 years. And the grants will be between 30 to 60k over those 2 years for each individual applicant that's successful. This time, this grant round is focused on specialist mental health providers because it's very much, we've been working alongside the public health teams and the clinical commissioning groups in mental health to look at how we might support the reduction of the CAMHS waiting lists at the moment. So that one will go live in the middle of October. I would say on that one, if we do receive a really good big partnership bid from North Yorkshire, we may award one single grant in North Yorkshire. So we're really open-minded, and when you read the guidance, you'll see how that would work. In November, we'll launch one of our small capital grants rounds. These are the most oversubscribed of all our grant rounds for small capital, and I completely understand why. There's not a lot of funding out there at the moment for small capital grants. So we will be targeting this grant round on capital grants that are for things that will support facilities or organisations to reopen after the pandemic or to extend their services to a new client base. So it's unlikely to pay for a storage unit for a football club's mowing equipment, because that would be business as usual. But if a village hall lost its boiler during lockdown and can't afford to replace it to reopen, then we would pay for that. We will be looking for this small capital grants round where an organisation received grants during the pandemic. That might have been business rates relief grants or COVID grants. If they were spent on capital items, we probably wouldn't fund that organisation. The reason being that we know a lot of groups got that and were able to do significant changes. Many couldn't. They spent it all on revenue to keep going, and that's absolutely fine. They would be eligible. But there were plenty of organisations that didn't get that boost of income during the time to do any capital work. So we would look at those as a more of a priority this time round. And then later in the year, we will be launching a Youth Potentials Fund, and this is for trusted adults to apply for that are working with a young person who has shown a level of excellence in a particular area, but due to funding constraints from their families or carers, they aren't able to pursue or excel at that particular subject. So an example might be you've got a young person who's excelling at a particular sport and wishes to turn that into their career but can't afford to do the instructor qualifications. It might be a really talented chess player who's got to a national competition who can't afford the travel to get there. It might be somebody who's been selected for one of the Team GB training pathways who can't afford the kit or the training camps, which tend to be down in the south of England. It won't be for education bursaries for higher education at this point, but I know the trustees have an ambition for that in the future. And it is very much a pilot, so we'll have to see how that one goes. Next slide, please. So the foundation is, while we're trying to spend the 1.5 million that we have this year well, we're also looking at planning ahead for our 10-year intentions. So the trustees are having conversations about, if we were to pick one major issue in each of our charitable objectives, what would it be? And what percentage of our future income would we put behind solving that problem? So, for example, under health, the trustees might look at the fact that we have disproportionately high suicide rates in Redcar and Cleveland and Scarborough compared to the rest of England. And would they put, a large chunk of the health strand behind work in that area? Or will they intend to keep it very much open, smaller grant rounds? My feeling is that they will invest in some particularly big pieces of work over that time. And once the mine goes into construction, into production, and the money is flowing as revenue from the mine, they would be looking at much longer grant periods. So, for example, at the moment, the education work we're developing, we're looking at a 10-year intention to fund, which probably sets us apart from a lot of other funders in the future. I would very much push that we always keep small capital grants going, that we keep smaller grants for revenue activities and social activities. These are all things that our smaller community organisations need and that are so important for communities. We're looking at just an early heads up for next year. We haven't had any funding rounds specifically targeted at older people or loneliness and isolation, so the trustees are likely to shape a funding round about that in 2022. And we're having conversations with communities about larger community place-based projects. We're looking at some community and youth leadership programs and some social enterprise support. I think one of the most important commitments that the trustees have made is that they want to maximise earlier investments. So during COVID, we funded a lot of community organisations who wanted to go through digital transformation, or they were doing work around setting new strategic plans for how their organisation could be sustainable in the future. After Deborah this morning, I'm a bit loath to use the word sustainable, but I will anyway. And they will have come up with a series of plans for their organisation that we funded. But if they then can't go on to get the funding to make those plans a reality, our earlier investment is kind of wasted. So we have made a commitment to go back to previous grantees that are doing that kind of work to check whether there is a follow-up conversation about follow-up funding. So we hold money to one side for those conversations. We're also really open to people just contacting us and saying, we're wanting to do this, is it of interest? Pragmatically, a quick email is the way to go with that, but you can give me a ring as well, and I've put my details on the slides. We do sometimes take forward speculative applications or speculative conversations that I know the trustees have shown an interest in or consider to be a priority, so we will always do that. But what we do commit to is giving you an honest answer. So, I had one this week, a tennis facility wanting to do a particular capital thing that I know will not get funded through the foundation's work. And I will give you a really honest answer and say that just isn't a priority for us as a foundation. So I always commit to doing that wherever I can. Next slide, please. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say. The grant rounds go live on our website, and they also go in the Community First Yorkshire monthly funding bulletin. So if you're not already getting that free bulletin, Joanne can help you to sign up for that. It's through the website. and there's the equivalent in Redcar and Cleveland if you're on the border. We also have Twitter, so you can follow us on Twitter. We always launch our grant rounds there. We are in the process of putting up a Facebook page. If only Facebook would let me back in again, I would do something with it, but they won't. But it's coming, and we're starting to use LinkedIn much more strategically as well to raise the profile of our grants to our local organisations. I hope that gives you a kind of feel for who we are at Sirius Minerals Foundation, how we operate and what we're funding. But I'm really happy to take questions.
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen. There aren't any questions in the chat box now, but if you'd like to raise your hand, and fire away. Leah's ready and waiting for questions. Anybody want to start off? Liz.
We're looking at updating the village hall and getting sustainable energy. We haven't done any great detail and looked at anything, but we also need to look at the acoustics, a loop system for people with hearing difficulties, and insulation. So it's like we may as well do the whole thing at one time. Is that of interest to you?
Yeah, so Liz, the bit around sustainable energy and insulation, that would certainly be eligible under the climate change round that will go live next week. What I would recommend is you think about how, as a committee, you can do an audit of the building, an energy audit, to actually think hard about all the aspects. And I know I can see Joanne nodding because I know she's had lots of conversations at Village Hall Networks about this. The team at Community First Yorkshire can guide you into the kind of things to look at. But you might want to consider, have you converted to LED light bulbs? What's the feasibility for using renewable energy? What are you doing with your waste? So take a holistic view, because the opportunity might not come up again through us. So I would take a little bit of time to think holistically about that, so that you can put in a comprehensive proposal for the community building. It may be you don't feel that you are ready to do that, and that you'd like to get some external advice, and we will fund feasibility and audits of community buildings under the climate change grant round. So lots of positive feedback there from me. Yeah, definitely looking forward to an application from you. I can't guarantee funding. I don't make the decisions, the trustees do. In terms of the acoustics and the loop, that wouldn't fit under the climate change, but I could see why you'd want to do it all together. You could have a look at the small capital grants when they go live. If what you're saying is we're going to run these series of new activities because we want to extend our reach into the community, and we can't do it without making it more accessible for different groups of the community, then I think that would probably be within the ethos of reopening it and extending services. But what you'll need to demonstrate is some evidence of what you're going to deliver, why it's important, how many people need those changes to the building to be able to access. Because without all that evidence, it's very hard for us to differentiate between the types of proposals we get in.
Right, that's absolutely fine.
Is that all right?
Thanks for that. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay,
thanks, Liz.
Just to add to what Leah's said, if you have a look on the Community First Yorkshire website, there's a podcast from a community building who's actually done an energy audit. So that might be a good place to start to listen to that, and there's other resources on there as well, Liz. Okay.
I think there was one about electric vehicle charging points. I get a lot of inquiries about that. That's worth exploring. And the other one worth having a look at is VONNE, VONNE, in the Northeast. They have a really good set of resources, which I know Community First Yorkshire are looking at and have put in your bulletin, about how organisations can take the first steps towards being environmentally sustainable.
Okay, thanks. Paddy, do you want to go next?
Hi, thanks, Jo. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Paddy.
Thanks for that. That was really interesting and useful. My questions were about applicants' organisational types. So does that change per grant? It'd be the first element of it. And then where do schools fit in terms of can they apply, or does that need to be linked to a Friends of Parent Teacher Association? And last bit, sorry, how developed a group needs to be. So, you know, if a group's just organising itself and maybe hasn't even got a constitution in place and things like that.
Okay, great questions. So we have a kind of core of people that we will fund. So registered charities always tick the box. So me and Joanne have lots of conversations about, if you get the opportunity to become a registered charity, do become a registered charity, because it makes it so much easier for funders to just, oh yeah, charity number, check your accounts, all done. But there are plenty of community organisations that it wouldn't be appropriate for them to be registered charities or incorporated. And we're just as open to them as well for the majority of our funding rounds. So in the instance of somebody who's not a registered charity, we'd be looking at who's on your committee, who makes the decisions, are they related or unrelated? Do you have a constitution or written terms of reference? Do you have a bank account? If you don't have a bank account, can you get a bank account? Probably not, because nobody seems to want to give a bank account to a charity at the moment. Could you find somebody else to hold the money for you, the parish council or equivalent? So we're really open to all of that. If that's a new community organisation, there were plenty of those that have started up during the pandemic. We are open to new organisations. We do occasionally get individuals that ring us and say, I've got this great idea and I really want funding for it. And I think, well, that is a great idea, but you're just an individual and we can't fund individuals. So in those instances, we'll try to pair them up to another local charity, or we'll send them to Community First Yorkshire for some advice. Or we'll try and encourage them to think about who else is doing similar work that they might partner with. Excuse me. In terms of schools, we vary the school's eligibility with every funding round. The reason being that we have over 200 schools in our area of benefit, and they would take every penny of funding if we opened it up. And it's really hard to differentiate between schools and their applications. We're also quite cautious around schools because we do have a pot of money for education that we invest in schools. So we want everyone to have their fair share and not for all the money to be soaked up by a particular type of organisation. When we are open to schools, we're open to the schools or the friends of. And normally if we exclude schools, friends of and trading bodies of schools. So we're quite explicit in our guidance as to when they can and can't apply. For example, the Time Together one isn't open to schools because we would have every school wanting us to fund residential trips, which we're still getting a lot of calls about, even though it says we won't in the guidance. But the climate change one, that is open to schools because we'd love to see schools doing things like thinking about the new natural history GCSE. It's got a massive climate change element in it. We'd love to support schools to roll that out. We'd love to support further education colleges to bolt on modules to their mechanics ones so that we actually have enough people to service electric cars. We'd love to hear from schools wanting to do projects around food production and local food production. So all of that, yep, absolutely for the climate change one. There are others that we sometimes will consider. So we will consider funding local authorities where we can see the money will be ring fenced. It's quite hard with the local authority because you put it in and it's very hard to do any due diligence on where it's gone, but we have, and you've seen that in the past at North Yorkshire County Council. So I think that probably explains them all. The one I will just pick up is KICS, Community Interest Companies. We will fund community interest companies for grants under £5,000 if they're a community interest company limited by guarantee, not by shares. So limited by guarantee, we can see that there's no potential to give shares or dividends. We have to know that there are two unrelated bank signatories. You could have two related and a third that's unrelated, but there have to be two that can, and you need to be able to show your finance processes that it's two unrelated that will tick them. So for us, it's much easier to audit if you do online banking because you have to have the two authorizations. Excuse me. Where we struggle is looking at kicks when the funding goes over 5k, because it can be quite difficult to check whether the money is going to individual or personal benefit when directors are being paid. We do a much more detailed due diligence at that point. So if you are a kick and you've got any questions around that, we're really happy to take calls before an application comes in. In fact, we'd rather have the conversation before. I think, does that answer all the bits of your question, Paddy?
And more, Leah, and more. That's great. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leah. You all right to take the next one?
I am. It's not COVID. I'm lateral flow test up to the eyebrows. I think I've just got
so I've got a couple of questions in the chat box. One from Sally and then one from Helen. So I'll start with Sally's question. We are working with a local artist to create an immersive experience for children, families, as an alternative to the traditional Christmas grotto. We have looked at the children and young people grant round that has just opened. If we applied, how quickly would we get a decision?
Okay, so we've already had quite a lot of applications in, and what I do is I scan every application as it comes in. I have the ability to do that at the moment. When we get 5 million, I won't have the ability to do that probably, but we'd love to keep scanning them as they arrive. And what we do as they arrive is we pick up if there's any missing information, whether it's just not eligible. And do you know what? It isn't going to score. It hasn't fit the criteria. And we'll phone you up and say it doesn't fit. Do you want to have a go with another application so you're not missing the opportunity? We've had quite a few in so far that are doing Christmas activities. And what we've said to our assessors who are assessing this grant round is, could you flag anything with a Christmas activity in it? The grants will be, and we're hoping for an electronic decision by the trustees by the 10th of December. And what we'll commit to doing is doing the letters for the Christmas ones ASAP and holding back the letters for all the others so that we prioritise anyone who needs the funding for Christmas. So that's how we're kind of dealing with those. As they come in, we will have a conversation if we feel it's necessary with the grantee, with the grant applicant, to say, so I had one last week, it's a Christmas activity, but their activity hasn't got its full budget because they want to consult with the children a bit more. So we've gone back and said, I think you probably need to consult with the children now and give us more budget information without raising expectations with the young people that you're definitely getting the funding. So we will try and be as helpful as we can around that Christmas deadline. Just on that one, Sally, what we would be looking for in the bid is which children have you consulted and do they actually want that? So that is the absolute key criteria for this grant round. Are you working with a group of children? Did they say they want it? And that's our starting point for this grant round. So we've got quite a lot of sports clubs coming through where they've sat down with their young people and said, okay, you do football with us. Would you love to do something else together to bond as a peer group, to meet each other outside of this football club? And then they've taken the ideas from the young people and put those in their proposals. So we're seeing quite a lot of those coming through. And we're seeing quite a lot where we can see what dates they're consulting with their young people, who they've consulted with. So I'd really recommend having a good look at that aspect of the grant criteria. Does that help, Sally? Oh, you might be on mute.
Yeah, well, probably not really, because it's impossible for us to consult with the town of, the children of Scarborough, because where would we start to do that? And
so where will the young people come from that will use the product?
So what we're wanting, it's in the old parcels office. So we're working with an artist to create this sort of immersive wintry experience where people will go through a labyrinth created out of cardboard. He's a cardboard artist, and children get an opportunity to make something at the end of it out of cardboard, and it'll be open for people to book time tickets to come through. So yeah, and people will have an opportunity to come and obviously we're trying to get money to be able to put all this together. So there isn't a dedicated group. I mean, what we're hoping is that we'll be able to invite classes to come through it as well as, and then at the weekends for the families. But at the moment we're trying to get the money together so that there isn't sort of, it's not like a club or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we're going to be open, quite a lot of days. So it'll be open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every weekend running up to Christmas. So we haven't got a core group of children.
Yeah, so it sounds a really lovely project, don't get me wrong, but it isn't really within the spirit of the grant that's currently live. If you were going to go and talk to school children, go in and talk to them in the classroom and find out what they would love to see in that experience, then you would be starting to tick the evidence boxes that we would look for. But, I'd rather be really honest and upfront about how specific the grant round is and what the grant guidance says.
Okay, thanks for that one. Next one from Helen. We currently have a large grant which finishes in December. Can we apply already for a small grant? The children and young people's time together, or do we have to wait until January? And will that small grant be still available to apply for in January? Okay,
so our grant rounds open and close on set dates. So time together will close on the 30th of October, 31st of October. Please check the guidance. I don't have all the dates in my head, but they all have closing dates on them currently. The only one that would be a rolling grant round is the Youth Potentials one, which isn't live yet. We don't exclude our current grants recipients from applying from any of our funding currently. That may change in the future, but right now, note you can hold multiple grants with the foundation. We don't discriminate. What might happen though is if we are oversubscribed for a grant round and your proposal is similar or of equal quality to other grant applications and they have never had a grant from the foundation, the trustees are likely to prioritise the organisation that didn't have a grant from the foundation before, simply because we want to spread the money as far as we can. But it will come down to the scoring criteria, and we do try to get a really good geographic spread. We get a lot of applications from the centre of Scarborough, understandably high population, but we're always looking for grant applications to fund from areas where we don't put a lot of money into. And we do look for a mix across both Redcar and Cleveland, Scarborough and the National Park. So no, absolutely fine to apply, but where it does impact is when we start to prioritise when we're oversubscribed. Did you want to add anything to that, Helen?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Next one from Matthew. We're a swimming club, been running for 40 years, called Everyone Active, have installed the wrong starting blocks when they built the new pool. We've been told that we must replace at our own expense of 2k per block, totaling 16k. Would it be possible to get a grant on equipment that we are putting into a building we don't own but pay a rent to use the swimming pool for training sessions? We have young swimmers that are currently swimming Yorkshire times and are potentially being impeded by not having the correct equipment.
That was bad luck, wasn't it? What a nightmare for you. Can I ask who owns the building and what sort of makeup of organisation are you?
Hiya, it's Kay, not Matthew, sorry. It's his computer. It's Everyone Active that actually owns the building along with Scarborough Council. And this argument, I believe, has been going on for a couple of years now regarding the starting blocks, not by myself, but by one of the parents has raised this problem. And they've basically said that if we want it changing, then it's up to us and the other swimming club that use the pool to raise the money and be able to replace them. I think they just didn't get the correct knowledge about what they should be installing when they built the building, unfortunately, and we're the ones that are now having to foot the bill and try and change it. The problem, sorry, I'm waffling on. The problem we have is that our children are learning. A lot of swimming is about repetitiveness and muscle memory, and when you're doing the starting, the blocks are so bad that they can't practice correctly enough times for when they then go to compete. And we do have swimmers. I say my daughter herself is going to Sheffield to compete in about 3 weeks' time. And, you know, how can they improve? And there's potentially children that are going to miss out that could do well. Sorry.
Yeah.
What else did you
Okay.
want to know, Leah? Sorry.
What sort of organisation is the swimming club?
It is it is a charity.
You're a registered charity?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. This one's quite hard to give a definitive answer on, I have to be honest. So it could potentially be a viable project under the small capital grants open round due to go live in November, because it would be about, you'd have to pitch it around your reopening the pool's equipment to be the right equipment after the pandemic, because I expect it wasn't used as much during the pandemic. Those grants are likely to only be up to 5k. And because the building is owned by Scarborough Borough Council, my gut feeling is the trustees would want some sort of in-kind match, you know, they'd want a cash match from the owner of the building, because actually the error is the owner of the building's error. But we would be sympathetic to the case you might put forward. In terms of how it would score under a capital grants round, I'm not sure it would be in the top scorers. I'll be really upfront about that, because it isn't the strongest one I'm hearing about, but it will depend on how many applications we get for that funding round.
Right, okay, thank you.
So probably worth going back to talk to the owners and say, look, we've got this opportunity. The odds are we've got more chance of getting some of the money towards it if you put your hand in your pocket.
Or if they don't spend 4 million on new traffic lights and just give us the money to give what children need out of the town.
Yeah, and it's all, I know, it's all about leverage, isn't it? You can leverage this money in if they put a bit in the pot.
Yeah, but thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Kay. There aren't any more questions in the chat box, so if anybody wants to just raise their hand and ask one in the kind of old-fashioned way, that would be absolutely brilliant. Anybody? Any more? No, I don't think so.
I'm racking my brain for the types of questions I get asked all the time.
I've got another one if you like, if that's all right, if that's not greedy.
Yeah,
just what you said about partnerships across North Yorkshire, and I wasn't 100% what you meant by that, so if you could expand on that.
Sorry,
Leah,
yeah, Paddy, I didn't phrase that very well. Across the North Yorkshire bit of the area of benefit. So with the children and young people's emotional wellbeing grants, the pot is 440k, I think. And what we've said in the guidance when it goes live, I'm just finalising it, is that if you're an individual organisation operating in North Yorkshire, Redcar and Cleveland, or the North York Moors, you can apply for a maximum of £60,000 over 2 years. But we are open-minded to the fact that in the National Park and in Scarborough, there is lots of health collaboration happening. So I'm thinking of the work of Health Creations, the work that Mark is coordinating. I've seen some really interesting stuff on the ground in Scarborough where groups are working together. And what we didn't want to do is have that daft situation where they want to work in partnership, but they have to bid separately because only individuals can bid. So we will allow partnership bids for more than £60,000. So they've got headroom to work in partnership, but we'd be hoping for partnerships that are bigger than maybe 2 coming together. What we look for here is it a genuine partnership? Are these organisations coming together because they know they can do better together and therefore we would fund them more money? Or is it organisations coming together because they hope that if 2 of them bid for 200k, that gives them more headroom than the 60k we give individuals? So that's the kind of test we'll be looking at. We are working, that one has an expert panel to it. So it's assessed by the public health consultants who lead on mental health for young people in both Redcar and Cleveland and North Yorkshire. It has a young person with lived experience on the panel, and then it also has the trustees and our learning partner. So between them, they will know the key mental health players across the patch, and they will know if that partnership is really filling gaps, and it is worth us putting perhaps half the money behind that partnership in for the National Park and North Yorkshire, whereas in Redcar we might not get one in, so we might award 3 grants of 60k. So we're keeping it really open. If we awarded one big partnership bid in Redcar and Cleveland and one in the North Yorkshire part of our area of benefit, we may award no 60k, 30 to 60k small grants. I hope that doesn't sound too confusing, but it's about staying open to the possibilities, not pretending that as a foundation we know better than the people on the ground as to what would work.
That makes sense. Thanks, Leah.
Okay, anybody else got anything they'd like to ask Leah? No, I can't see any hands up there. Okay, well, in that case, have you got anything else you'd like to say, Leah, or?
No, just I really am very happy for people to call me. I know a lot of funders say, don't call us, just email us, don't talk to us, just put an application in. We're the absolute opposite. If you've got any queries, you're not sure if you're eligible, you want to check if a project fits a grant criteria, have a look at the website, read the guidance, give us a ring. Honestly, we absolutely don't mind. And when we do ring you back, if you put an application in and we say, really, this is not going to score high, I do mean it really won't score high. It's amazing the number of people I give feedback to and they go, oh, we want to keep it exactly as it is. And I'm like, but it's not going to score highly. And would you like to try and again, and this is what you might, think about. We do try to give helpful feedback as much as we can, as early as we can, to every single one of the people that apply to us. I'd much rather you didn't waste your time filling in an application form, as simple as ours are. I spent 10 years filling in application forms, and many a time I've just wanted to ring the funder up and say, give me a clue, is this what you're looking for? And there was no ability to do that. So do take advantage of the fact that you can ring us and talk to us.